Hey now, welcome to the Dirty Side of the Track, America's leading Formula One podcast. I'm Brian, that's Rob. Today was the Bahrain GP. Cars on Track racing is here. Rob, are you as excited as I am, man?
I am, and my fingers, they forgot what it was like to be frantically typing notes while we watch a race so that we can know what we were talking about when we come to record this. So yeah, I think my fingers are just recovered. So especially as we got a lot of new listeners compared to when we started this adventure last year at our first race. Let's quickly recap what we do. We will go through news and social as normal, just kind of hit out on what happened during the week. And then we don't tend to just pick on one part of a race and try to be clickbaity or disruptive or whatever you want to call it about reviewing races. We just kind of give a bit of a Reader's Digest version. So we will pick the bones out of practice and quali, which bits caught our eye, and try not to play Captain Hindsight now that we actually know the race result. Warning, we will mention that before it, so if you don't know the race result, you might not want to listen on. And then we'll go, not lap by lap, but I think we probably call it phase by phase. We'll go through what we saw unfold today, and then pick the bones out of it right at the end, slap a pit lane pool review on the end, and get ready to look ahead to the weeks that follow. I think that pretty much puts a bow around what we're going to do, right, Brian?
Definitely. And for anybody who's heard any of our prior episodes, we love to do the 100 seconds of DRS with listeners, fellow F1 fans like us. And we actually have forgotten to ask, I have forgotten to ask for anybody to do the 100 seconds of DRS. We've been a little busy and obviously getting ready for the season, the excitement. So if you are interested in doing the 100 seconds of DRS quiz with us, let us know on Twitter at F1 Dirty Side. We'd love to chat. And so, yeah, let's get into the week, Rob. I mean, what did you see kind of kick off the week?
Bit of a slow burner, to be honest, as we were coming up to race week. I was expecting a lot more kind of frantic last-minute things to drop out. But main thing that caught my eye early on was Susie Wolff's been appointed the F1 Academy Managing Director. So, and while that's great news, and I think she's a fantastic appointment for it. The reason I'm laughing is the picture that went out on a couple of places was, do you remember that those apps when they were making drivers and team principals, truck drivers, all those different types.
Oh, yeah.
They also did a turning them into females, right? So You were kind of looking at, I remember we both had a little bit of a crush, I think, on female Carlos Sainz. Anyway, they also did one for Toto, and that's the one that a few of the memes put out saying, congratulations on Susie Wolff being appointed to the Academy Director, and put out the picture. Not an official one, just a few of the meme channels, and that was funny. And
do they know she's a proper racing driver? I mean, she was a test driver for Williams for a bit. One of the few females to drive an F1 car, so...
Yeah, she's really good.
Yeah, she is. Awesome appointment. And as we debated last week, AlphaTauri, were they for sale, not for sale, sell high, buy low, put option, a call option, I don't know anything I'm talking about, but they were going to be for sale, and quickly, after they heard us debating whether to sell while the value of F1 and teams are incredibly high, they put the kibosh on those rumors. They said, nope, the dirty side's onto us. We're not going to sell the team. But when someone is forced to come out and make a statement like that, more often than not, there's actually some investigation behind the scenes. I'd be curious if this is actually dead or, they just don't want people on their trail like us.
Yeah, exactly. And then we had the first major bit of news that was probably going to be quite significant was Stroll's had minor surgery on both wrists. So we all knew that he missed testing. But it was really shrouded in secrecy. Did he fall off? Has he broken wrists? What's going on? They kind of came out and said that he's had surgery. It's well, there's no way that he's gonna be in the car, surely. But he was, and we'll talk about it a lot more when we look at kind of some of the things that happened during free practice that kind of really raise a lot of people's concerns in the Twitterverse. But we'll keep our powder dry there. We'll come back to it when we get into the free practice review.
I have a question for you about soccer, as we call it here in the States. So Tottenham, the Hotspurs, if I got any of that right, have agreed... Tottenham? Anyway, they've agreed to build a karting track with F1 under their new stadium. How cool is that? How come your team, Arsenal, can't get their act together and do something like that?
Because, you see, Tottenham aren't a very good team. So because they're not a very good team, they have to try to bring in revenue in other non-soccer ways. So when you see a team that has to go and start looking at making their new stadium more conducive to holding music events than it is to actually holding a game, and now they want to go and put a karting thing underneath it, it really shows that you're not really that good a team because you've got to go and try and spend money elsewhere. So that's Tottenham for you. You don't understand it, but it's...
I don't. I mean, I understand it because teams like the Dallas Cowboys make a stadium that is tremendous and hosts every event they can because they realize that's money and money is good. So I don't understand why you're so looking down on it. But all right,
because they can't bring revenue in through their match day tickets because no one likes them because they suck. So then they're going, well, how else can we get people in here? We spend all this money on this stadium and no one wants to come and watch our rubbish team. Anyway, moving on. This is an F1 podcast.
Jealous.
You started it. Yeah, just Arsenal are top of the table, Brian. I'm not going to be jealous of Tottenham.
So in the rookie season of 3 drivers new to F1 this year, there are some pretty neat parallels that Sky Sports pointed out. You have Piastri at McLaren, you have De Vries at AlphaTauri, and you've got Logan Sargent at Williams. If you go back to 2019 also saw 3 rookies at the same teams, even if AlphaTauri was then Toro Rosso. You had Lando Norris, Alex Albon, and George Russell. So it's kind of a cool set of parallels. Same teams, rookies coming into the sport. The difference, I think, being that the 2019 rookies seemed to be friends, right? They grew up in karting. They knew each other. George and Alex and Lando were part of sort of the quintet that would always, or quartet, I should say, that streamed all the time because it was mainly 4. Sometimes it was 5, but that were streamed during COVID, and they did their rookie recap, and they were clearly friendly, at least. Whereas Nick is older than both Oscar and Logan was, here and there. I know he's F2, but it'll be curious to see how they perform, and we'll talk a little bit about them in today's race. So
we will, yeah, we absolutely will, because I think there's quite a good piece to pull out of what happened with the rookies. So before we get there, I think that kind of almost puts a bow around news and social. The last thing we have to do, and I know you're not struck on this as a name yet, but I'm going to go for it anyway. It's time to open up the door to Brian's video vault.
Yeah, still not struck on that one. So, we love to do this, just quickly kind of hit some of the social items that have come out, in particular videos from the teams and from others around F1. This week, there were so many videos out. I think they were trying to kill me. I think they were trying to get me divorced and just kill me by having me sit in the basement watching videos all day and all night. So I'll hit 6 real quick, and I promise to keep it quick. Vic Starr and Wilney versus F1 world champions. Apparently 2 people on YouTube I have not heard of. But they had a bunch of F1 former drivers and F1 current commentators and some YouTubers on a karting track. It's 8 minutes. It's totally worth it. And I have a very cheap shot, but I'm going to do it anyway because I doubt he's listening. Martin Brundle was in it, and he once again has never led a lap.
Oh, ouch.
Because he's obviously, for people who don't know, famously, he's a very decorated F1 driver in his own right, but he never led a lap in an F1 race, and he didn't lead one in the karting. Anyhow, then there was, so it's on the Sky Sports F1 channel. Check it out. It's worth it. There were a few from the F1 channel that were definitely worth it. The Ultimate Guide to F1 in 2023. It's 12 minutes. If you're sort of a lapsed or mid-casual fan or relatively newer, check it out. There was one as well, the Beginner's Guide to F1, 4 minutes. If you are a beginner, welcome. We're very glad you're here. Check out this video. It kind of gives a good overview of what to expect on a Grand Prix weekend. And then they also had the Meet the 2023 Formula One drivers. It's 9 minutes. It's really good. And this is for anyone. I loved it. And I've been a fan for a bit. I loved it. I thought it was great. So those 3 from the Formula One channel. And then this was interesting. They did a video on Sky Sports F1, and apparently they recorded a bunch of these because they're like the same people, just mixed up in different orders. Defend like Hamilton or attack like Verstappen. What would you rather have with Alex Albon and Young Philly? Again, I don't know Young Philly. I didn't know him last week when I saw the other video they dropped. Still don't know. But they got in a car, and I'm not saying we're covering this Albon content just for Claire, but Claire, you made a comment. You want more Albon content. This was coming anyway. So it was fun. It was basically Alex driving around Silverstone with young Philly asking him questions. I had one problem with the video. It's 4 minutes. Watch it. You'll enjoy it. I promise. One problem. And it's not with the content. It's with the fact that they're in a Mercedes, but I don't think it's an AMG. I think it's just a regular E-Class coupe. Well, hold on.
And for anyone, well, no, 1 second. And anybody who's new to the dirty side, when ever a Mercedes appears on anything, if it's not an AMG, then Brian loses it. He cannot stand to see a Merc if it's not an AMG. So go on, carry on.
Well, but here's the thing. Alex tries to take a couple corners kind of quickly, and at one point, young Philly goes nuts. I mean, he literally, oh my God, he's screaming and yelling for like 30 seconds like the car's going to tip over. You can't do that in a regular E-Class. It's impossible to make what happened happen. So anyway, and trust me, I watched a video like 4 times checking the exhaust pipes to see how many exhausts there were to count. Anyway, I'm a nerd.
I'm not quite sure if your nerdism to AMG rivals your nerdism to tires. It's a very closely run thing.
Cars as a whole. I love all cars. And then the last one for everybody was on the F1 channel. There was some debate about it on the Discord. If you're not on the Discord, why not? All access behind the scenes with Valtteri Bottas. Close?
You almost said it right, yeah.
On Media Day. Friend of the pod, Valtteri. As you may know, we did an episode with him recently. I'm trying to hold off playing the sound every time. And so he kind of showed everything that goes on to filming all of these things with F1. They do a lot, almost all of them, it appears, before the season starts, and Valtteri took us along. So those are great. There are a couple others I didn't get to. I will next week. Inside McLaren's $300 million headquarters with GQ Sports, and how to build an F1 car from Aston Martin, which is timely.
Ooh, foreshadowing. Right, and as always, I will put the links to all of these videos and a link to the Discord in the show notes. So you don't have to just take Brian's word for it. There'll be a nice little hyperlink. You just click, go and watch them all, and then also maybe click and join us on the Discord as well. So Aston Martin, yes, it brought us up to race week. So practice. There's so much to talk about in the race. Let's just quickly skip through practice. And the two main things that I pulled out of FP1, 2, and 3 were 2 things, Brian, and then you can say if you agree. There was lots of wobbly carbon fiber going on.
Yeah.
So we had, I don't know whether they're trying to get away with the minimum amount of, I don't want to say glue because I don't think you use glue on an F1 car, but we had problems with wheel brows. I love the fact they call them wheel brows, so like the little eyebrow things that go over the front wheels. We had the Ferrari's rear wing look like it was held on by duct tape at one point where I think Sainz rode a corner and the whole thing pitched and yawed like it was at sea. So I guess it's all about weight reduction, and maybe some of these joints aren't as strong as they need to be. And so that was kind of one thing. The other thing was, and I don't know you've got a sound effect for it, and if you haven't, Brian, we might need to, because it was all aboard the hype train for Aston Martin, specifically for Alonso.
Choo-choo!
I mean, every part of my fibre was wanting to say, this is only practice, let's not get too carried away. But every practice that went past, and especially FP3, that Aston Martin was really looking like a fast car. I mean, really looking like a fast car.
It was. And, coming out of testing, there was a lot of hype about it. I got a lot of notes from people saying, thanks for pointing out the Aston Martin hype for testing, because then when quali happened and when the race happened, people were like, oh, I kind of knew to watch for them. Honestly, we were lucky. You learned so little during testing. We think and thought that Aston Martin had a quick car. And again, on the Discord, JP and I both were admitting that we were really hoping it was true, but we also weren't ready to trust it. And when practice happened, I agree. That was when it sort of said, yes, this is probably true. There is something to talk about, the hype train. However, I do have one Aston Martin note I want to make real fast. Lance Stroll, I love the fact he came back and tried to race and did race. I love the fact that he was obviously in pain. I mean, he had surgery, and in FP2, he had to be helped out of the car. Like, he couldn't use his hands to pull himself up out of the car. They had to pull him out of the car, and everybody went nuts in the Twitter sphere worrying about his health, and rightly so, because if you're in a situation where you have to get out of the car quickly, you can't wait for someone to come pull you out. But obviously, he'd passed the extraction tests. He was in a great deal of pain, and I don't know what it is. There's a word, and I'm not sure what it is. It's motivation, perseverance, drive, determination. It's something, a mix of all those that athletes have to play through things like this. He didn't want to miss out on a fast car, first race of the season. He's got a chance. So while I'm not the world's biggest Lance Stroll fan, I never really have been. He's fine. I'm just not on board the Lance train. Great job by him for getting back out there and doing it. He couldn't even use his hand in FP2 to turn the car.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I'm going to pour a little bit of water on those flames of controversy that you're trying to start there, Brian.
Controversy?
No, I'm going to say controversy.
I don't know
But
what that
anyway,
means.
I think Twitter wanted to react to that because looking back at it, if there was any shadow of a doubt that he would have failed the extraction test, he wouldn't have been allowed to race. Simple as, right?
Right.
Once he's passed that and he can get out of the car, I don't need to get out the car in practice. I don't need to put extra stress on my hand if it is a little bit bruised after the first round. So why not have all the mechanics help me out? It's not this, oh my God, he couldn't get out of the car after practice. I bet he could, but why make him if in practice it's like, guys, just so I don't put any extra pressure on this hand, can everyone come and help me out? Yeah, of course we can. That's a completely logical, normal thing to have happened.
Yeah,
but the internet sees it and goes, oh my God, it's fixed. Stroll's father has paid off the FIA to allow him race and he will never be able to get out of the car if it's burning and he's going to die.
The equivalent, though, would be like if LeBron tweaks an ankle, he doesn't take a wheelchair from the bench back to the locker room. So, I mean, that was a little bit of... I get your point.
Why put extra pressure on the hand if you don't need to? So
Quali came next.
Quali.
And Quali was great. Oh, it's so great having F1 back. I gotta say, just as a fan, the adrenaline I had watching Formula One again, phenomenal. Quali was great. Here's a quick takeaway before we go through the sessions. They were all so close. The cars were so close together. To me, the takeaway from all of this was we're going to have a great season of racing because there was the delta from first to last in each of the sessions was not that large.
Yeah, I thought actually we were going to get a SapStat jingle played for it because I think you've got a stat around the delta between
a user
beginning to end.
Stat. So here we go. SapStats Paul G submission edition Quali 1 Bahrain. 1.6% performance difference from start to dead last before the end of Q1. And then Zach Brown made a similar comment stealing off Paul's submission to me. It was tremendous. The whole thing, 1.128 seconds apart. The whole grid, Q1. And we know the leaders ended up going faster in Q2 and Q3, but still, this is exactly what we've been hoping for. And again, it's not going to happen overnight, but as years go and development happens and the top teams have less wind tunnel and the bottom teams have more, as the cost cap stops people from overspending on certain things, even including catering. As you look at it at this point, we're going to find, I think, that the racing will continue to get better. And there will be teams who take steps back. And we'll talk about one I have in my list at the race in a little bit. But we lost all the rookies plus Pierre and K-Mag in Q1. And Lando barely made it through. He had the same time as Logan. It just Logan's came later. So Lando gets to go through, which was the first sign McLaren's in real trouble.
Yeah, and also the first sign that the Williams might not be lagging around 19th and 20th. I thought Logan did a superb job. And like to miss out in your very first qualifying and getting through to Q2 on I set my lap time second rule. Oh my gosh. I mean, A, he's got to be frustrated, but B, he's got to be so proud. It's not like he got dumped out right down the bottom of the thing. He was basically in Q2 all but just... Yeah, I wonder if he kind of looks back and think if I could just got the power down earlier out of that last corner or whatever it might have been. I mean, dead heat.
Yeah,
I mean,
and a lot of people hating on Logan going into the week, by the way, saying he didn't deserve the drive or to be in F1, that he didn't have the resume. He definitely comported himself well throughout the entire weekend, and the results showed he deserved to be there.
Yep, and then Q2, Red Bull decided to turn up, and if we thought we were in for a bit of a jumbled up grid, they went, yeah, hold my beer, and just absolutely nuked it. Yeah. I mean... You have to marvel at it. The combination of man and machine there with Max and that Red Bull purring, we'll get to it in the race as well, but that was just absolutely fantastic.
Max, super Max. I hope Lollipop Man gets some stuff going again soon. Yeah, that was great. The cars were so tight. It was Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull, Aston Martins, Esteban, and Nico Hulkenberg, who made it through to Q3. That was a surprise.
Yeah, it was actually, although he's always been a good qualifier. That was one of the things they always said about him, wasn't it? And we'll talk about Haas when we get to the race then. And then Q3, I mean, wow. Max won in, I think we said last year's pole was a 1:30.550, I think it was, and Checo went faster than that in testing. So we knew the pace was probably there in this car to beat last year's pole, but it was, it was mid 130s, and then Max goes and drops it into the 129s, and I don't know that anybody even really had a shot at pole after that, to be honest.
Well, and I got real confused. Last thing I'll say about Quali is Alonso did, I think, one quick run in Q3. He came out kind of later, did one, and was in the pits at the end. Charles, as you and I kind of started talking about, did not go out for a last fast lap, sort of saying, I don't know if we can go faster than we did. There were only 5 cars on track as the checkered flag came down, and I didn't like that. I recognize you can save tires for the race. You could save a set of soft tires for the race. That's great. In my opinion, you always can go faster. You can always go out and do better. You should always push yourself. And to have 5 cars sitting in the pits at the end of quali was very confusing to me.
Because, well, it's the downside of the thing that you love, which is tires, which is like, what's the point? What's the point of, like, if I can maybe get from 4th to 3rd by burning through a set of tires, but over 57 laps, I'm better off having those extra softs, then what's the point of making one position on the grid? It means nothing, really. However, that'll come back to bite me on the ass big style, because all these softs that everybody set aside and saved, it's going to be my rant later on. No one used them. They all anyway. I'll keep my powder dry for my rant, because I'm not a fan of tires, and today really annoyed me. So.
Well, all right then.
Yeah, all right then. On that note, so oh my gosh, there it was. Cars lined up on the grid.
So
lights
exciting.
Lighting up. 5 lights up, 5 lights out. Lights out and away we go. It was so exciting. Checo, of course, got way too excited. He didn't even notice what was going on. And when the lights went out, he was like, oh, yes, I'm supposed to accelerate now. And it was an awful start from Checo.
That was an awful start from Checo. Clean driving, though, getting around the corner 3-4 wide at points with the Ferraris and Checo and others putting their nose in there. And then a couple turns later, still lap 1, Lance decides to give Fernando a little love tap in the back. And Brundle did a great job trying to say it wasn't all on Lance. And it's not all on Lance, but it's pretty much on Lance. I mean, he went in too hot into the corner, and when Fernando slowed and cut across the apex, and they ran into each other. And it was funny. I didn't listen to all the team radio yet. We're recording this pretty quickly after the GP. But I wonder if they actually didn't tell Fernando it was Lance until much later, because that's what the announcer said. That would be hilarious if that's true.
Absolutely, because they were all on that of, would he know? And then they were convinced it was a puncher, and they were like, Alonso's going backwards. I was like, oh, no, the hype train has just come
derailed.
to an abrupt end. Yeah,
which is a popular thing in America nowadays.
Yeah, true. But it didn't. It thankfully didn't transpire. It was just kind of a tap, and it got away with it, and off we went. And
Max went too, by the way.
Well, kind of. And then
he did.
No, well, 1 second. Kind of. Then I got my false optimism, and then it got crushed. So Max went off into the distance and quickly got up a 2-second gap. I was like, oh, God, here we go. But then Charles started nibbling into it, a tenth, and we got down to 1.7. I watched it go from 2 to 1.9 to 1.8 to 1.7. Like, okay, here we go. And then Max decided, I'm not having any of this, and was about 3 weeks in the lead, about 2 laps later. I mean, he put his foot down, and after, I think it was a lap and a half, maybe 2 laps of eking out those tenths, 1 lap later, I know Charles locked up, but 1 lap later, Max is 3 seconds in the lead.
And then he never looked back.
I
think
back.
That little
Never
delta that you saw was true. But what he did was he cracked open a Red Bull, and he had to take a hand off the wheel and the glove off to do that. And he's like, oh, I got this set. And he actually was able to take one leg and put it up on front of the car and just kind of cruise, because he was gone. We didn't even see him anymore. The George Russell Witness Protection Program plan from last year is going to be Max. We're going to see him at the start and when he pits, and that'll be it, because he's just going to be so far ahead. I hope this isn't for the whole season, but Max fans, you should enjoy watching him for about 10 seconds a race.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what happened that I'm actually really hopeful for now is an indication of the rest of this season, is that although Max disappears off into the distance, we didn't get huge deltas developing throughout the rest of the field. So we've kind of almost seen the races break down into 3, maybe 4 tiers of teams, where you've had like the leader and a little pack behind them, then the kind of the upper midfield, then the lower midfield, and then the bargain basement trundling around the back wondering what they're doing.
Which is Haas. What happened to Haas?
Well, okay, so Haas looked like they were maybe, all they did right at the beginning with K-Mag was decide to go the opposite strategy, right? So he's the only one on the grid to start hard tyres. So I was like, okay, that might come back to him later. There's a reason why he's at the back, but he wasn't being dropped by the rest of the field, even on the hard. So we were getting a very good, close layout. And actually, it was quite jumbled up as well. So I was really enjoying it, despite the fact that my eyes did keep going up to watching Max's Delta just go, and go. I'm like, okay, so unless we get like a DNF from Max has won this already by lap like 8 or 9. It's like it's just done.
He had a 10-second cushion already by lap, and it was on Charles, which gave me hope of a Ferrari at least being on the podium or battling. Agreed. Field super close. It was kind of Noah's Arkish at one point, where most teams were within 1 or 2 of the teammate.
Yes.
So 2 by 2, not always tight together, but 1 or 2 behind. So you got to feel for like the constructors running. The biggest delta, in the first 10 laps between teammates was Valtteri and Esteban, much higher over their teammates, and some of that was really, I think, just cleaning up qualifying. Pierre obviously had a problem Q3 and then no time. Esteban had not officially gotten 47 penalties yet. We'll talk about that in the first 10 laps. But I mean, after 10 laps, Max was 6.5 seconds clear, to be honest, and it was starting to go. And Alonso got into George's DRS.
Well, and just before
great.
He did, Alonso. Yeah, I mean, we were about to get the hype train into top gear here, but just before that, and we had one of those radio messages, which I wish I was the engineer, where I could just. George comes on the car. Oh, I think what's Lewis's strategy? Because like I'm faster than him, so I'm a little crybaby. I just wanted to come over the radio. Go, well, if you're faster, overtake him. Just overtake him if you're that much faster. There's a simple solution to this.
So when you heard him crying about Lewis's strategy, did this go through your mind? But in a different way? Like,
in a different way. Just overtake him. And as it will transpire later, he didn't have the pace because this is the closest he gets to Lewis for the rest of the race. So...
good call. And then we find out Esteban's inaccurate grid positioning. And so it comes across, there's going to be a penalty. And I just love this story for like 8 reasons. Like, how bad can it just kept compounding. A little tiny driving mistake. He was too far up in the box at the start of the race. Ends up costing him something like 20 seconds, and then he ends up retiring. I mean, it's just epic. It was just a snowball. One little mistake. I'm pretty sure he's getting a penalty right now at the airport because he's lined up too close in the queue to go through the scanner. I mean, it is unbelievable.
I don't know if you've got the Benny Hill music queued up, but that just feels like it should go from this point onwards in the race. Ocon's race should be set to that.
This was the music. Team radio for Alpine, basically. Question?
Because we'll come to it later as we kind of go through this in chronological order. But yeah, I mean, whoever it was that touched that front wing before the time penalty was served,
it just kept
snowballing. So
yeah. Anyway, we'll get back to it. So then Ferrari does a pit. First of all, Alonso and George, great racing. Alonso's overtakes made the race more exciting for me, and I don't just mean more exciting. I mean, I hit a lull in the middle. The race had 3 sectors for me. Sector 1 was the start and the first handful of laps. Loved it. Sector 3, the end and sort of all the battles for position and points. Loved it. And then there was this middle section, what you called tire management. And I said, I'm getting kind of bored. And you got very angry at me. And that's okay.
Well, I did, because there was still, even though we did go into the hard tyre lull, which was always going to come, there were still overtakes going on, so you must have just fallen asleep. Or maybe you were too busy typing in the notion that you were typing your notes, you weren't actually looking at the screen. But yeah, George and Alonso was fantastic. Ferrari actually did a good job. Like, if you think about their Monaco nightmare last year where they come in, no, stay out, and they messed the whole thing up. They did a great double stack almost today. It wasn't a double stack because they had the right timing. They brought them both in on the same lap. Charles come in almost as soon as he's being dropped and going out. Sainz seamlessly comes in and goes. I thought, okay, this is looking good.
No one used the wrong tires. All the tires were there.
And this is where the start of my rant is going to come in, is that like they'd held back that extra set of softs by not sending Charles back out again to try and improve quality. And I'm thinking, okay, everyone started on softs. This first round, a lot of people have come in on hards, and we're going to see this in a minute. A couple of laps later, Max and Checo come in and, well, we knew they went to softs. The TV didn't agree with us for a while, but so I'm like, okay, so Red Bull are going soft, hard, and that means almost the rest of the grid look like they're going soft, hard, soft. So will Red Bull having to make hay while the sun shines and really get out a gap, because they're going to be left on the hards at the end while everyone else chases them down. Brilliant. And it just didn't come out that way. And if everyone else went soft, hard, and they were never going to run multiple sets of softs, what the hell did they stay in the garage for in
I don't know.
quali?
You told
Because
me it was a good idea.
Well, yes, of course I couldn't see the future at that point. I thought, yes, great, they're keeping extra set of new softs, which they didn't use.
Rob, if you don't believe as a racing driver you can always do better, and you don't want to go out at quali at the end and try to set the fastest lap you can, then you shouldn't be in the business. And whomever made that decision at Ferrari...
No, right, we will disagree here. You can't have it both ways. You can't beat Ferrari
I
up all the time. You can't beat Ferrari up all the time for being a clown show and not having good strategy. And this time when they're actually being pragmatic and going, there's no way we can
But then they
touch
didn't
that.
use it.
No, but 1 second. At that point, you didn't know this. You can't play Captain Hindsight back in time. So at the time at quali in Q3, where they've looked at that and gone, we can't touch that Red Bull time. There's no point scrubbing a set of soft tyres because we can't get into the 129s. It's just that time is not in the car. And there's no threat coming from behind because no one else is going to be faster than us. That's actually good call from Ferrari for once in about a million years, because what's the point of burning a set of tyres for nothing?
I appreciate the idea of holding the tires back. I don't appreciate the idea of them saying, we will never get that fast. We cannot do any better. That's as good as it gets. You're a race driver. Send him back out. He can always do better.
They're not
But
miracle whip. If that car physically can't do a 129, then what's the point?
Well, Charles did a 130 flat. That was his exact time, 130.000.
And if they've looked at the telemetry and said there's nothing you can shave off that, not half a second. He wouldn't need another half second, by the way.
That was
well
the
in
world's
the
perfect lap. I doubt it. There's no such thing as perfection. You can always
You're just one of those people like to beat Ferrari at whatever they do.
Well, okay, we'll talk about the reliability in a second. So then Valtteri and K-Mag going back and forth on track, and then lap 15. Then, thank God, Zach Brown was the team principal on the radio this weekend, because then the fiasco started.
Oh.
Oscar, boy, electrical problems. Oh, don't worry, it's just the steering wheel. We'll swap it out for you. They do that, and then the best part is that on the onboard, they actually see him rebooting the steering wheel. Like the McLaren logo comes up, and I'm like waiting for a Windows blue screen of death.
Turn it off and turn it on again.
That's what they did. We got to reboot the car, and then it didn't go anywhere. And then Lando's having pneumatic pressure problems, and they keep having to fill the car with air. And I'm like, what has happened to McLaren? They are going backwards faster than any team on the grid. However,
I felt so sorry for Piastri,
I did too.
Because we were all watching it in the bar and we could see. Well, they did the steering wheel reboot, and then because it was like right in the middle of like everyone's pit window, you kept seeing another car come down the pit lane, and people
and
would
the whole
yep,
McLaren
still there.
The whole McLaren team huddled around the car.
Yeah. And then that person would come in and leave. And then it'd be another shot, that overhead shot of the pit lane. And here comes another car. And then you're like, has he pulled out? Yeah, has he pulled out? No, Piastri's still there. He must have been crushed. You don't want to go out that way.
There was a lot of people in Papaya standing there. And as I'm watching it, I'm thinking, Papaya, yeah, that was bad. Valtteri got passed by Alonso next. And then we had Valtteri and George kind of going at each other, which was a clash for Rob. Did he cheer for the British guy and George, or does he cheer for friend of the pod, Valtteri?
Friend of the pod every time.
Every time.
Oh, every time. I couldn't.
I'm pretty proud of myself. I made it this far, but I got to do it.
This is Valtteri Bottas, and you're listening to the dirty side of the track.
I made it further than anyone would have thought I would have made it.
Yeah, so I know you've set me all offside now, thinking about his glorious moustache. Anyway, yeah, and at the front, Max just continued to disappear. And here's before we knew what was going to happen in the second round of pit stops, I started getting like a little slither of hope, because although he disappeared off into the distance, we had that point where Max came out. We all saw white tyres go on. Nobody in race control saw that, and the TV was showing
red tyres.
We saw red tyres go on, and they put hard tyres up on the TV. I'm like, he's not on hards. Anyway, he's on the softs. Charles is on the hards. And it stayed static at 10.5 seconds for about 3 or 4 laps. I'm like, oh, okay, this should be the bit where he's really pulling away now, because it's soft versus hards. But Charles was keeping it static. I'm like, oh boy, when this is role reversal in the next round of pit stops and we have soft versus hard, we're on for one hell of a showdown. And it never arrived.
Never arrived. I love the fact this is also around the time. So, for anyone who's newer to the dirty side, I'm the one who enjoys tire strategy, and Rob is sitting here tearing his hair out over the Ferrari tire strategy being, different from Red Bull's, but not working the way he wanted when he figured the soft was coming last. But this was one of my favorite moments, lap 20-ish, 25, 30, when Esteban's 5-second penalty is announced for the grid situation. And then he comes in, and they decide to fix his wing as well, and they start working at about 4.5 seconds in. and they start working on the wing. And then the FIA is like, no, you didn't serve the 5. We're going to give you 10 more. Okay, so now we're up to 15 seconds for doing this wrong and for parking a little bit incorrectly. So when he comes back in later, I'm going to go out of chronology here. He speeds in the pit lane, which is perfect. So he gets 5 more. He is now at 20 seconds of penalty time for screwing up by an inch on the grid line. And then I think what happened was because he served the 10 and the 5 together at the end, he'd done tried to do the first 5 and didn't, and so he got the 10 for that and then the 5 for speeding. Crofty got all worked up in a lather. He's 35 seconds of penalties. Well, I think he added the 15 twice, is my guess, because I only saw the 20 that I was aware of. But geez Louise, that was a bad day for Alpine, at least for Esteban in particular. But man, I was getting a lot of notes from people wondering what's the record in a race. I don't know the answer to that, but this was a good way to start the season, huh?
Yeah, it was, and this is kind of also when we were in that kind of lull where I thought we were in the lull for a lot of the hard runners, just trying to make sure that they could eke the longest out of that to then give them that kind of whatever it might be, sort of 15, 20 hot laps on softs. But it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. We got to the second round of pit stops and everybody was on a hard, came in and put whites on again. I was like, what? What's going on?
Yeah, and then the McLaren disaster continued. Lando on a 6-stopper to keep getting air. 6 stops. Another embarrassment and a horrible record that they probably have, Lando's 6-stopper. And listener Mark sent a note that said, Daniel Ricciardo is the winner of the day. $18 million not to have to sit in that car today.
I know.
Yeah. And then Stroll undercuts Russell. We got Alonso going for the overcut. And then what was great is we kind of start looking at in the 30s, Max moves to hards. And as you said, this is kind of everyone's on the hards at this point. And Alonso starts chasing people down. And this is where the end of the last 20 laps, in my mind, it got glorious. Fun to watch. The strategies had been sort of cemented. And now we're just battling it out on track. And it's Alonso behind Sir Lewis Hamilton.
Do you know what? Watching Alonso overtake multiple people today, you have to... he is a genius because he doesn't overtake people at the moment that he sees the car in front of him. And what I mean by that is he tees it up. He manipulates the car in front, I think, about 3 or 4 corners ahead because he makes these moves. You just watch him take these completely different lines around some of the corners. Not because he's actually trying to overtake them here and now. He just knows he's either setting himself up for a better drive out of a corner or he's destabilizing the car in front because they're watching their new massive mirrors to see where he's to see where he is.
The green car behind him flashing around.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And he did it on earlier on when he'd overtaken. He's going to do it now on on Lewis, and then he's going to go and hunt down Carlo. And he did it time after time. He made overtakes where you didn't expect him to make overtakes, and he just like a puppet master manipulates the car in front to be exactly where he wants them to be. Now he's got a good car underneath him. He's actually showing the real racer that's been, I think, kind of maybe suppressed for a couple of years.
Well, and I would just say, I got to take a quick side note. This is for you, Rob. When we did our bold predictions 2 weeks ago, it was before testing, and one of the predictions that I had was, so I have a Fernando podium. I had a Fernando podium this season,
yes,
and before we knew Aston was going to be good. And I even went on to say I thought the car was going to be crap. I was wrong on that. But amazing job by Fernando. Like you said, these overtakes were epic, and he's out there, in between these overtakes, then asking questions about the rest of the field as he's trying to set up his own strategy for attacking people. And he's asking about Lance, and he's telling them the car is great. I'm surprised he wasn't phoning in trades for his E-Trade account from the race. It was wild, man. It was wild.
And then, as a Ferrari fan, to really double down on the disappointment that the Red Bulls were so much faster. Charles's car then lets go. And then Charles is just too much of a nice guy because, if there was one shot disrupting the whole thing, like don't park your car in a safe place and bring a safety car out, that might have kind of maybe screwed things up for Red Bull. But no, he went and actually parked it in the best place possible. It was brilliant and perfect positioning to allow that to be easily recoverable and get away with the VSC. Yeah. So
didn't hurt any of the people in front of him. Didn't hurt anyone's battles. He did the right thing. He could have, as you said, Yuki'd it and kind of come into the pits and then gone back out and parked it in the middle of nowhere, like the Dutch GP last year.
And when that comes on, and that we didn't hear the team radio telling Fernando that Charles was out. I imagine it took place, or he just saw him as he went past him under the VSC. But Alonso's eyes must have absolutely lit up then when he can see the back of Carlo's car, and this is podium 99 within his sights, right?
Totally.
And you just knew he was going to get him. He just started eating into it. He got into DRS. That was epic. I think it took a while to get done. He got into DRS and it took a few laps. I think we were treated to like 3 laps of him setting it up. But oh man,
what was interesting to me too is it seemed inevitable that Fernando would take Carlos. And what also at the time seemed inevitable was that Lewis would then come take Carlos because Lewis had been on Fernando's bumper. And I don't understand what happened after that, where Fernando was able to get past Carlos, but Lewis never really made much of a charge on Carlos.
Oh, he did.
It was like a second or two, but he never actually got up and had a chance at a maneuver.
Yeah, he did. Is this the bit where you fell asleep? So he got like right down to like 0.3, 0.4 seconds behind under a couple of DRS attacks. And I thought, well, this is inevitable. He's sizing him up for an attack. He got almost front wing under rear wheels at one point.
Oh, I remember this now,
and then either he'd hurt his tyres by attacking
because it was 2 seconds at the end.
Or Carlo was able to turn the mode up for the end. I don't know, but you're absolutely right. It looked like it was going to be just as inevitable as the Alonso pass. And then it was DRS, 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 DRS. And then suddenly it was 2.5 seconds, and he never closed it again.
So you're right, but it never got back again. He had a little battle, and then you're right.
I thought he was backing off a bit, maybe for right. I've had a couple of laps of attack. I'm going to back off for a little bit, and then I'm going to go again. But he never went again. But what was interesting while all that was unfolding was that Lando kind of showed that maybe there is some actual pace in this car.
This was the weirdest part of the race.
Yeah, he caught those two up. He was 2 or 3 seconds behind them. He caught them
a lap down,
up.
But
he's a lap down, and I wrote a note saying, I think at this race, at this pace, he's going to unlap himself. And it wasn't like a soft versus hards. I think all 3 of them were on hard tyres. And you had Lando legitimately catching Hamilton and Sainz. I was like, what's going on here? And then he had to go in for his 100th pit stop. But
do you know they used so many tires the last time out he was on wets? Just kidding. Just a joke. No, I did not understand that. Like, I loved it. If I'm a McLaren fan, that is clearly what I'm taking as a positive, was that you had Lando hanging on the back of Alonso, Sainz, and Lewis. He was a lap down and on his 5 pit stops on his belt with a 6th on its way, but he still had that pace. And I don't understand where that came from. That's exactly what they have to focus on in McLaren. Not to miss at the same time, actually a couple laps earlier, AlphaTauri, both cars battling, and Joe stick his nose up in there, said, I'm interested in fighting here too. I loved it. Like that, the end of the race, it came alive, and everybody said, to hell with the tires. I'm racing the people around me. We're going to run this thing to the end. And it was great. God, it was great. And then Alonso, lovely car to drive. And we had a great battle for the last point, 10th. We had Yuki coming up behind Alex, and that Williams looked. I said this earlier. Who could hate Williams at this point? I don't know why you would have a problem with Williams or Alex. And Logan seems like a good dude. We don't really know him, but when it was Latifi, I'm like, why would you hate anyone or have a problem with Williams? So I cheer for Williams just out of the I don't dislike them category.
Yeah, and I joked on the notion that, you know, obviously Logan's not going to want his teammate to run into any issues, but as Yuki, because at that point it really was a softs on hards battle, and Yuki was flying and he was all around Albon, and Logan's sort of sitting behind, you kind of thinking, if those two kind of have a little bit of a coming together, I could get my first point in Formula One here. But, I mean, you know what? Well, first off, before we kind of pick up the bones out of lower down, we have to say well done to Red Bull. I mean,
oh my gosh, domination.
Everybody else on the grid, and this is where my tyre rant comes in, everyone else had to go softs, hards, hard, basically. I think everyone else did 2 stints on hards, 1 stint on soft. Maybe Yuki. There was some switching up at the end where people were maybe like you say, to hell with it. Let's go after things. But the front runners all couldn't get, I guess, the tyre deg under control to be able to run 2 sets of softs, apart from Red Bull. And that's why they finished well, that's not the only reason, obviously, but they were able to run double soft and were only run the hards once, and they absolutely cruised it. So, ominous, maybe.
Yeah, it is. It's very ominous.
Well, okay. Here's my right.
Max, one of the best drivers, if not the best driver on the grid today. I would say he probably is. In the best car? Ominous.
Agree. However, what we don't know yet, everyone's like, going, oh, and last year, Ferrari won here, so this is a huge stride forward by Red Bull. I'm going, well, hang on a minute. We don't actually know. From years and years of watching Formula One, we all know that certain cars will do better at certain tracks than other tracks. Different tracks will favour different cars in different ways. I think Bahrain is a track that naturally favours Red Bull. It's just last year they didn't get a chance to show it because both of them blew up. So, part of me does think this is going to be the biggest epic battle for second in the constructors ever, and Red Bull are just going to disappear off into the distance. However, that little optimistic part of me that doesn't want to write it all off after the first race is, do you know what? It's first race. And sometimes cars do have a great start and do go well, and then others start to catch them up over the rest of the season. But, I mean, if you wanted to lay a marker down as Max Verstappen, today you massively put a marker down and went, that's what you guys have got to come and try and beat.
Oh, totally. 100%. One last thing from the actual race action, just to recap. On lap 56, I noticed, or 55, 56, I noticed something on the board that made no sense to me at the time. We had two cars in the pits, not retiring, but in the pits. One was Lando for his sixth and final top-up of air. Sixth stopper. And then the other was Joe, and he was in the pits, and I have to give a standing round of applause for Alfa Romeo as I see what they were doing. I could be way off on this. Way off. But what they did was this. Pierre Gasly had the fastest lap prior to that. The gas man was up in like ninth, right behind Valtteri. And he had the fastest lap, and that would give the point to Alpine. And Alpine and Alfa Romeo are likely going to be near each other in the constructors table at the end of the year. So Alfa Romeo, with Joe out of the points, pit him on lap 56. They send him out. Now he's got low fuel because he's burnt a lot off through the race. They put him on softs, and he took the fastest lap. He did not finish in the points, so he doesn't get the point, but neither does Alpine. And neither does Pierre. And I thought that was a masterclass in strategy, looking forward and saying what's going to happen. So I could be wrong. There's probably other reasons, and you feel free to let us know on Twitter or Discord or wherever that we're idiots. But to me, if that's why they did it, then super kudos. It took me about 30 seconds to figure that out. I'm like, oh, they're just taking the point away from a competitor, both in the drivers and constructors. So loved it, Alfa Romeo.
I did. I loved seeing Fernando back up on the podium.
Yeah.
I thought that was fantastic.
So good.
And as we kind of like pick the bones out of what happened further down, I think Lewis has got to be happy where he's come there. I don't think, Mercedes had been downplaying it all week that they weren't going to be competitive, and really nobody was competitive compared to Red Bull. So if you take the Red Bulls out of the equation, Lewis putting it where he did up there, that was pretty good. I thought George had a bit of a nothing race.
Yeah,
he
agreed.
just threatened at the beginning and then just fell away. Valtteri did well to get in the points that Alpha does look good. Like I say, Zhou then with the pace as well to go grab fastest lap, so they seem to be well placed. Williams, Logan was top rookie. Williams did well there with, what did they get? 9th and 12th, I think
10th.
it was.
Alex was 10th last in the
Alex was 10th, was it? Okay. So they were looking pretty good. I think, like you said, Haas, the gamble with the hards at the beginning didn't pay off for K-Mag. Nothing really came for him. And Hulkenberg got his ruined by losing his front wing early on. So
I disagree a little bit. I agree with those challenges and the strategy and the wing, and I agree all that. I think they look slow. Even after that, they had a whole half a race to try to catch somebody. They fixed his wing, and they could have gone out and changed tires, and they did. They still sat basically in the bottom of the people still running. I mean, Haas finished 13th, K-Mag was 13th, and Nico was 15th, but we had a couple. Lando was 47 laps down, carrying around a tank of air, and we had 3 guys not finish. And Joe went in for the fastest lap. So basically, Nico was the last running car on track, trying to maintain the position. And then De Vries, who they did not pit under the VSC, and he got just eaten up, and K-Mag. And I don't know. As I looked at it, I would say Haas looked worse. McLaren had a horrendous day, and I was about to write them off for the season, because I'm an idiot and would have done it too soon. But that Lando pace at the end really put a little question mark in my mind. And so Haas bad, McLaren maybe bad. Pierre salvaged something for Alpine, going from 20th to 9th. The gas man looking frisky. AlphaTauri slow, but maybe better than Haas. And Williams, I loved it. Alex in the points. And like you said, Logan, top rookie 12th. That's a great job to be that close to his teammate. But Valtteri was the king of the midfield in my mind.
King, are you slightly biased because he's been on this show?
No, because if anyone not in a Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes, or Aston Martin, the next fastest driver was Valtteri.
Oh, okay. I would have said Stroll was. I mean, it depends on what you define.
I don't consider Aston Martin midfield anymore. I'm sorry. After today,
so your midfield starts at 8th.
Yes. No, 9th. It's just Charles fell out today. Well, because honestly, you have Red Bull, and then I think there's this tier that we will determine of Ferrari, Mercedes, and Aston Martin. That's my belief. Right. Okay. I think those are the four.
I see where you're going. I thought you were just trying to give Valtteri the kudos for being the king at 9th.
Anyone not in those cars I just named, he was the best.
Talking of Valtteri, someone who happens to work for him is friend of the show and regular contributor Pit Lane Paul. If this is your first time on the dirty side listening to a race review, then Paul will diligently send us in a race review after every race. And here we are with our very first race review from Bahrain from Paul. And before that, another jingle. It's our friend Andy again. So he gave us the Pit Lane Paul jingle last week. We've got another one here this week. So like we said last time, anybody that wants to make a jingle and send it in, go for it. But here we have Pit Lane Paul's first review. But first, a new Pit Lane Paul jingle.
Excellent work, Andy. Mr. Pitside, let's hear from Paul now. And by the way, we're recording this really fast after the GP, so we haven't heard Paul's review either. So this will be new to us as to you.
Hey guys, so that was Bahrain. I know I was quite negative last week about testing, and I maintain that testing's horrendous. Anyway, Bahrain is small. In fact, in Asia, only the Maldives and Singapore are smaller, and it's a race we go to later in the season. In fact, it's the 23rd smallest in the world. Monaco is second, San Marino, hometown of Imola, or the home of Imola should I say, is third, and Singapore 20th. Pointless facts for you, but we actually race in 3 smaller countries than this place, and it's only 295 square miles. And for comparison, as I'm here, Manhattan Island is 22.8 thousand square miles, but we don't race there. Los Angeles, 501.6. We don't race there either. Miami, 55.25, and we race there. By now, needless to say, after 3 weeks in the desert, I'm struggling to make sense of life. I like Bahrain, it's great. Unlike both Brian and Rob, Bahrain is not even 50 years old, so it's still quite young. And of course, it hosted the first ever F1 race in the Middle East, so we really need to celebrate this brilliant place. Stop rambling, let's talk about the first race. As you guessed last week, and as I've just said, I don't really read into testing too much. Teams often hide their full potential. And for me, you never really get a full idea until qualifying, which of course happened yesterday. And I have to say, I still think some teams are slightly out of position. Next race, we'll see what speed has to offer. So there's a lot still to be decided on that front. So, I mean, basically, when I wrote notes for this small segment, and yes, I do make notes, believe it or not, the average size of cities across America in square miles really isn't stapled into my brain, so Google's often my best friend. Anyway, at this stage, I'm sat in Valtteri's room. It's 2:45, just over 3 hours to go until lights out. But yeah, we're quite excited to be going. And that was written, and the race has just happened. I'm going to cough. Professional as always. So the race just happened. Let's face it. Let's talk about the negatives first of all, because I can't be too positive. And the negatives of Red Bull, they are a little bit advanced. Max drove way into the distance. That's pretty much the only negative we're going to go on. The actual rest of the race was pretty great. Aston Martin looked good. I think the battle between those and Mercedes is going to be fantastic this year. It could have been over very early into the race. How they didn't take each other out, I don't know, but they didn't, luckily. And I'll say luckily, 'cause it was actually quite entertaining watching how it all sort of unravelled from there. So that was good. Further into the race, what we got, there's a bit of a late incident with Leclerc. That's very sad for Ferrari, but that brought out a little pit stop dilemma for our guy Valtteri, whereas then the cars behind boxed for softs because they could, there was no risk. But it also meant that they could pretty much close down our 20-second gap in 2 seconds, 2 seconds a lap. So it was, dare I say it, touching cloth time towards the end of the race, if I can say it like that. But luckily we held on. But yeah, it was a pretty good race and quite entertaining. And to be from our side with Valtteri to be the best of the rest is good. That's always a positive moving forward. The car looks good in corners. How we are in straight line speed is we don't really know. We'll find out in Jeddah when we put different wings on it. But on the whole, today belongs to two people, Max Verstappen, who drove into the distance, and a big shout out to Esteban Ocon, who I'm quite sure tonight is probably going to go sit in the dark room and just wonder what he bothers doing this sport for. That was, for his side, pretty disastrous today. Great guy, but penalty after penalty. I do love him. He did the right thing at the end in just retiring the car, because who knows what would have been next. If a guy was going to hit a camel live on the circuit, it probably would have been Esteban today. I've just heard he's cancelled his flight home through fear of anything bad happening on that one either. But onwards to Jeddah, good to get the season started, and we will catch up then. Brian and Rob, you are that old. Don't tell the listeners you're not.
We are not that old. Oh, so Paul feels the same as me on Esteban's luck. I love it.
Oh my gosh. I'm wondering how many post-race beers Paul actually had there, but that was a classic travel facts Paul meets race review Paul. If you've never heard Paul before, that's what we get: some insights into where he is in the world, and then the view from inside the pit lane. And yeah, you're absolutely, you said king of midfield. He said best of the rest. I think that's probably where Valtteri ended up. I did think he was going to get caught. I mean, Paul's phrase there, touching cloth time. Yeah, I thought he was going to get gobbled up as those guys in the softs came, but they just ran out of laps to catch him. So I think it's a great first race in the bag. I'm looking forward to Jeddah as well.
I am too. And, there is one good thing. Paul said, and we've talked about it, is ominous. I think the word we use is the domination from Max and what the season ahead might hold. We have one last stat we want to hit before we kind of close the door on the race itself. And this one is, I'll use a different jingle, came from Sap Stats from Lee Edition. So on the Discord, we were kind of going back and forth. This one is an interesting one. In the last 6 years of Formula One, the person who wins the first race has not only never won the championship, they've always finished second in the championship. So a very specific statistic. And a couple people picked up on this later in the week. But in 2017, Seb was first in the season opener, finished second in the championship. 2018, Seb first in the season opener, second in the championship. Valtteri, 19 and 20, finished first, won the opening race in both years, finished second in the championship. 2021, Lewis won the first race, and we don't want to talk about how that finished. And then 2022, last year, as we already talked about, Charles won here in Bahrain and finished, as we know, second in the championship. So, if we're going to believe in statistics and fully in the past and not look at the future, that means Max will finish second in the championship. So who will finish first? Yeah, it's going to be Max.
He's so good, he's going to finish first and second.
But you know what? He may have enough points.
Oh, man. Okay, so, yeah, I mean, that wraps up the first week's race review. We are recording this too near to the race ending for Fantasy to have updated, because it looks like it's going to take them 3,000 years to run their algorithm.
Unbelievably so for qualy. Unbelievably so. We will talk about it next week. I just want to say really fast, we will also publish a blog that one of our listeners wrote about kind of the game itself. The game had some struggles. I appreciate everybody who took the time to try to get in. And if you have any questions about the game itself, listener Andy, who was like 26th in the world last year, wrote a blog on Fan Voice. It's really good. I will put a link out to it on the Twitter this week. I do want to say one thing about my team real quick. I struggled mightily. My original team was Verstappen, Leclerc, Valtteri, Fernando, K-Mag, Ferrari, and Aston Martin. and I backed out. At the last minute, I woke up before quali, and I said, boy, I'm going to get all aboard choo-choo the Aston Martin train. And I did. I went Verstappen, and I went all in. I even said this to Rob on the side. I was putting all my eggs in 2 baskets. Red Bull, I had triple Red Bull. Verstappen, Perez, and Red Bull as a constructor. I had triple Aston Martin. You want to talk about blind luck? I went Fernando, Lance, and Aston Martin. And then I went with Joe. And unfortunately, you get points for overtakes. So going for the fastest lap, which I don't think will count because he wasn't in the points, does not help because he lost all the overtakes he'd had. But that said, I feel pretty good about it. I didn't use any chips, so I saved everything up. I'm sure there'll be people ahead of me. But it was fascinating. I feel when Charles pulled over and the engine let go, and I said to myself a little bit in the back of my mind, fantasy team worked out.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a little confession to make, so I'll go around mine and I'll save the confession to the end. So I was all aboard the hype train as well. I've got Fernando and Aston Martin in there. I obviously went for Max and doubled down on his points this week because if you don't do that, you almost have to do that to defend against everybody else because Max just at the moment you just have to have him and you have to have him doubled up. I had Ferrari as my other constructor because I wanted to cover off the basis against Ferrari and Red Bull. Obviously Valtteri. My mistake in hindsight for this week is I picked George. I thought George would do all right. I thought he would be the stronger of the 2 Mercedes and might be the best of the rest. I thought, I've got George and Alonso that are probably going to be the 2 kind of going for it. George let me down there. But my apology needs to go to the person who I probably cursed. I wanted an Alpine driver in there. I went back and forward between Gasly and Ocon over and over.
You had Ocon?
I've had both of them in and out this week, and at the end I looked at it and went, do you know what? I think Ocon gets my blessing. So, Esteban, the reason why everything happened today is that I always have bad luck in fantasy, and 1, if not 2 of my drivers will be ultimately cursed, and looks like I've named my team Vales Fails, and Ocon, you were my failure today, so we'll find out just how badly that impacts my final score for next when we do the roundup next week. So next week we don't have a race, so next week's show will be, I imagine we'll have quite a lot of news and social that falls out after the pulling the bones out of the first race. We'll have the fantasy update because hopefully by next week the scores will have finally finished calculating, and we'll also have a preview of Jeddah because we've just got the one gap in between. So anything else you want to say about opening race day, Brian?
Loved it. I'm so excited racing is back. Part of the reason we did this quickly was because we were both hyped up on adrenaline from watching the first race. Formula One is back. This is beautiful. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We hope you are well. Have a great week. We'll talk to you again soon.